I'm Leland Free from Moulton, Alabama, and the camp commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans there in Moulton. I know some of you folks, I think. And anyway, the Sons of Confederate Veterans is a historical and heritage group. It's non-political. Don't get into politics, don't get into religion. It's just to make sure that a complete and true history of what happened during those bloody and terrible years, 1861 to 1865, and Reconstruction afterwards. Just make sure that history is preserved. Well, I've always been fascinated at how little the general public really knows about the war back then. I'll never forget, several years ago I went up to Newmarket, Virginia, where some of the first battles took place. Of course, it's been turned into a national park, and it's developed, and there's tour guides and so on. Of course, at that time it was just a field. And as the tour guide was forming us up, I heard this little boy ask his daddy, "Daddy, why was there always the battles fought at national parks back then?" And his daddy turned to his son and said, "Well, son, think about it. That's the only place they could find restrooms and plenty of parking." So that tells you that the general public just has no concept of timeline and so on, what went on. So I've been fascinated with that. By the way, how many Yankees does it take to shoot a cannon? Do you know? Depends on how tightly you pack them down the barrel. Okay, lame joke. All right. In order to understand this series of events, and I saw from your itinerary that you've covered quite a bit, so I won't dwell on a lot of this stuff in depth, but in order to get a thumbnail sketch of what happened, we'd back up a ways in American history. What happened in 1607 in American history? What settlement first came to America? 1607 from this country. What country is this?
England?
Sir?
England?
Yes. This is the true English flag. So the first colonies that came over here that we know of in 1607 was in Jamestown, Virginia. And the ships bore this flag, and of course the settlements bore this flag. Now here's what we think of as being more like an English flag. Now, this represents all of the British Empire. Now, at the time that England was around then, it did not have these red X and the bars. Those were added later when Ireland became part of Great Britain's empire. But this represents the empire of Great Britain rather than just the one country. Of course, Great Britain's colonies and protectorates are spread all over the world. Well, what happened in 1619 in American history? That was the first time that the Dutch brought by indentured servants and sold them. Okay. Do you know what an indentured servant is, or bond servant? What?
Someone that has to stay inside of, it has to serve someone for life, become their slave, and until you make enough money to get back home or something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, ma'am.
Indentured servants, I thought, were actually like people that wanted to come here on the boats to America, and they didn't have enough money to pay for it, so somebody else would, and they would
That's right.
become the person that paid for them as indentured servant for however many years.
That's exactly right. Somebody that did not have enough money for something they needed would sign a contract that says, "I belong to you until my debt is paid, until the amount of money that I borrowed from you, or until what we've agreed on is settled." And say, for instance, if I indentured or bonded myself to you for $1,000 and for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, then my obligation to you would be ended. Well, what if in the middle of that time, maybe just two years, you decided you really don't want to have somebody in your employ, you'd rather have the money? You could take that contract that you and I had signed and sell it to somebody else. And somebody else would get the benefits of the labor of this person for the remainder of the contract. say if we had made a contract that I belonged to you, or I'm in your service for 5 years, and at the end of 2.5 years, you decided you'd rather have the rest of the money, the $500, you could negotiate or sell that contract or sell our agreement to somebody else. And you could sell it for any amount you wanted to. So if 500 is all the rest of what I owed you, you could turn and sell my contract with you to somebody else for 400 or 600 or whatever amount you could get out of it. So the Dutch brought these indentured servants over and sold these contracts, which makes you feel like selling the people. But what they sold was an agreement that included people. Almost like if you agreed to buy a car, and midway through paying for the car, you decide you want to sell the car to get your money back out of it. So that's how the first indentured servants came over here. Well, what happened in American history in 1620? 1620, we got the first another settlement. That's in Plymouth Rock, under this flag, under the British flag. So the colonies began to grow and prosper, and because the northern colonies were closer to Europe, there was a lot more traffic, a lot more shipping coming in the northern states than there was the southern states.